Hello everyone, Chris Green, the History Chap, and just chatting in on Friday morning for you. It's just gone 11 o'clock, so I've grabbed myself a coffee, and I thought I'd just spend a bit of time, as it's the end of the week, having a coffee, and it's Coffee with Chris, the History Chap, just updating you on some of the events that have happened in British history this week. So let's kick off. First and foremost, I've got to just say thank you to all of you who've watched and commented on last night's video, all about the bridge on the River Kwai. It's going great guns. And so it's obviously something that a lot of people are interested in, enjoying. A lot of people making comments about British prisoners of war, Japanese prisoners of war, of the Japanese. Anyway, going down really well. So thank you very much. But anyway, let me share with you some things that happened in British history, because British history isn't all about the British Empire. It's not always about battles. Although the first thing I am going to share with you is about a battle. What have we got? 17th of October, 1173. The Battle of Fornham St. Genevieve. You've never heard of that one. That's actually a battle here in England. It was outside Bury St. Edmunds, or near Bury St. Edmunds in Suffolk. Battle of Fornham St. Genevieve. This was during the reign of Henry II, the first of the Plantagenet kings of England. Henry II had the most incredibly, how would we describe it? Dysfunctional family. I think that's a good way of describing it. He fell out with his sons on a regular basis. His sons fell out with him on a regular basis. He had a whole brood of them from his wife, Eleanor of Aquitaine. And they basically rose in rebellion on a regular basis against their father. And in this particular case, it was his eldest son, a young teenager, he was only 18, called Henry. He was actually called Henry the Young King. So he was Richard the Lionheart's elder brother. So he was destined to be king. When he was 15, he was actually crowned king. It's a bit of a bizarre one. Some of the French monarchs used to do as well. So basically, they'd crown their anointed heir and say, "This is the king, and if any of you have got a problem with that, we will have it out on the battlefield." And so Henry the Young King is never named as a king of England because he never ruled in his own right. In fact, actually, he wasn't given any lands to rule by his father, Henry II, and that was part of the problem. Young Henry the Young King, wanted some realms, either in England or certainly over in France, to rule. So he rose in rebellion against his father. He was only 18 at the time. He was leading a rebellion, major rebellion. He was actually gathering quite a lot of support over on the continent in Henry's lands in France. And he brought some mercenaries landed, some of his nobles who were supporting him landed in England. Henry the Young King was over in France. Some nobles landed in England. They had a force of about 3,000, mainly mercenaries, some knights, and they marched inland through East Anglia. They came to Fornham St. Genevieve, or Fornham, just outside Bury St. Edmunds, and there was a royalist army facing them. Actually, a royalist army smaller than the rebel force, but better organised. And they actually caught the rebel force. The royalists caught the rebel force trying to ford the river. Those of you who know anything about your military history know that trying to cross a river is always a dangerous manoeuvre in any battle, right up until almost modern times. And they were caught. Their cavalry was captured. A lot of the mercenaries were forced into the local swamps where local peasants loyal to the king, hunted them down. The battle, small fry, even by English standards, as far as numbers are concerned, or certain numbers killed concerned, but effectively it made England secure for Henry II, and it sort of eventually put to pay to Henry the Young King's revolt. Henry the Young King actually then died 1183. His father outlived him till 1189, and the crown passed to his younger brother, Richard the Lionheart. And indeed, when Richard died, there was another younger brother called John, King John. He came to the throne. So anyway, that was the 17th of October, 1173. And Mark Stevens, it seems that being a royal in the past wasn't a healthy position. You're absolutely right. And more sure as heck, that Henry II's family, as I say, totally and utterly dysfunctional, if ever there was one. And indeed, Eleanor of Aquitaine fell out with her husband. She sided with her sons at different moments during an acrimonious reign. Same date, 17th of October. But 200 years later, 1346, the Battle of Neville's Cross. This was between Scotland and England. It was actually a Scottish invasion of England during the 100 Years' War, where the English were fighting the French. The French and the Scots had an alliance. It's called the Old Alliance, or Old Alliance. And it was basically always the French wanted to have the Scots on their side, always to basically put pressure on the English. Whenever the English sent an army over to France, they'd have to be looking over their shoulder to the north towards Hadrian's Wall, watching what the Scots would do. The French basically called upon the Scots in that Old Alliance and basically said, we need your help now, invade England, take some pressure off us. King David II of Scotland invaded England, harried the north of England, got us into County Durham, not far from Durham itself, and there was an old Anglo-Saxon cross on a hill, and there they met Neville's Cross, and there they met an English army. They weren't expected. They were the Scots heavily outnumbered the English. It's one of those classic battles where, nevertheless, outnumbered they might have been, but the English took the battle to the Scots. The Scots lost. Scots had something in the region of, I think it was about 12,000 men against 6,000 or 7,000 English. So a sizable battle up there in the northeast of England. And sorry, the battle was. Thank you very much, Teddy. The battle, the Scots lost somewhere between 1,000 to 3,000 men. The chronicles weren't particularly accurate in those days, and most of all, King David himself was captured. King David II of the Scots was captured, so it's completely and utterly knackered that bit of the Old Alliance, two-pronged attack on the English. Interestingly, King David was taken first off to Bamborough Castle in Northumbria, which, for those of you who follow Uhtred of Banba from Bernard Cornwell's stories of the Last Kingdom, that's the castle. Well, obviously a medieval version of. And then eventually he was taken to London. And that was the Battle of Neville's Cross. Equally, slightly different one, 17th of October, 1814. Totally different to battles. We have the London beer flood. Now, I've done a video on this. In fact, there's a description. There's a link in the description below. So by all means, have a look at that afterwards if you want a bit of sort of light-hearted fun that isn't a battle or this Friday. But fundamentally, a brewery in London had a whole lot of big vats of porter beer, which is very thick beer, almost sort of like Guinness. Okay, and those beer aficionados will now tell me it's not Guinness. I know, but it's the best way to describe it for a lot of folk out there. Okay, had these huge barrels. And basically, there was a chain reaction. One exploded and set off another lot. 2.5 million pints of porter beer suddenly formed almost like a tsunami of beer through London, 15-foot high wall of beer. And it flooded into the neighbouring areas, slum areas, and drowned 8 people. The brewery was on the site of what's now the Dominion Theatre on Tottenham Court Road. Obviously was demolished. Dominion Theatre is there now, but a great story. And as I say, there's a link to the video down below. 18th of October, 1016, Battle of Assendon. Battle of Assendon was between the English and the Danes. The English under Edmund Ironside, the Danes under King Canute. No one's quite sure exactly where the site of the battle is, but most people say it was in the county of Essex, although, as I say, various views as to exactly where in the county of Essex it was fought. It was what had happened was basically the Danes had invaded England, long-running feud with Canute's father, Svein Forkbeard, and then Canute himself, and against the English under Ethelred the Unready, okay, or King Ethelred. And when Ethelred died, Canute came back to seize the throne. Ethelred had a son, Edmund Ironside, who was a bit of a warrior in the old-fashioned Anglo-Saxon sense, something his father was blatantly not very good at. And we had a bizarre situation. London proclaimed Edmund as king of the English. Meanwhile, the Witan of England, which was sort of like an early form of parliament, very crude, okay, they declared Canute king of England. which is somewhat embarrassing, is to, oh yeah, actually we've sided with the wrong side. Basically, there was a war, call it a civil war, but an invasion war, Danish army under Canute versus Edmund Ironside and some of his English supporters. They met at the Battle of Assendon, somewhere in Essex. During the battle, the Mercian Earl, who was supposedly supporting Edmund Ironside, a man called Edric Streona, a weasel character if ever there was one, who had already betrayed both Ethelred the Unread, his father, and had already betrayed the English on several occasions, now decided to desert the battle and leave Edmund Ironside to his own devices. Edmund was heavily defeated by Canute. They signed a treaty which basically said that Edmund would rule Wessex, including London. Canute would rule the rest of England, and whoever died first, their portion of England would be ruled by the other one of them. It so happened that Edmund died first. He died in London, and many people believe he was assassinated. Some people say he was assassinated while sitting on the toilet, and a spear was thrust up from underneath. Great, eh? And Canute became King of England and ruled England, and in fact the Danes ruled England for the next best part of 30 years. So roughly 30 years before the Normans conquered England, actually the Danish had been in control of England, and most people forget that. And Canute was a real character. There we go. I'm just going to quickly look because I'm getting loads of chat here. Stephen Cross says he's read about a molasses beer flood. Yeah, in Boston, I believe it was. With another disaster I think it was the 19th century, might have been very beginning of 20th. I stand to be corrected on that. Yeah, you have your choice. In Boston, Massachusetts, you could be drowned in sugar, molasses, or London, you could have been drowned in porter beer. Take your pick. By the way, in the porter beer one in London, some of the people in the slums actually they rented their houses out, almost like sightseeing trips. Like come and see my flooded house. And there was one occasion where part of the scaffolding someone had erected in their house collapsed, and someone drowned in the beer. This was effectively after the flood, but the beer was still there, and the stench of the beer supposedly stayed in that part of London for quite some time afterwards. And Stephen Cross again is saying, wow, you're on a roll here, Stephen. Thank you very much, mate. There's a pub called the King Canute at the highest point on Canvey Island. It's somewhere in Essex. Assendon was fought. The Battle of Assendon was fought. Where are we now? 19th of October. Let's move on. 19th of October, 1330. Edward III arrested Roger Mortimer at Nottingham Castle. Long story short, we talked about King John very briefly earlier as one of Henry II's children, and probably ranks as one of the less good kings of England. We also had Edward II. Edward II, son of Edward I, the Hammer of the Scots, the man who conquered North Wales. Edward II was not a patch on his father. He actually was in charge of the English at the Battle of Bannockburn, where the Scots under Robert Bruce decisively defeated the English. And basically there was a rebellion. Roger Mortimer had an affair with Edward II's wife, Isabella. Edward II was imprisoned. He was effectively usurped. He certainly died in Berkeley Castle in Gloucestershire. Some people say he was murdered there in some pretty unpleasant circumstances, if you follow the legends, which I'll leave out. But let's just say that it was in a similar sort of vein to Edmund Ironside's supposed assassination. Mortimer, the crown didn't pass to Mortimer and Isabella, but they were the powers now in the country. There was a young teenage king, their son, another Edward III. Those of you who know your history, 100 Years' War, Edward III was a warrior, like his granddad, Edward I. And Edward III basically snuck in to Nottingham Castle, where Roger Mortimer and Isabella were set up. They came through tunnels under Nottingham. Those of you who know Nottingham at all, lots of tunnels underneath Nottingham in the rocks there. And there's a particular hole called Mortimer's Hole, a passage that goes up underneath the castle. And basically Edward III snuck into the castle, abducted Roger Mortimer. Isabella, his mother, was shouting out her classic line, fair son, have pity on gentle Mortimer. Well, if you know Edward III, he certainly didn't have pity on Edward Mortimer. He took him down to London, and Mortimer was hanged at Tyburn. And supposedly in Mortimer's Hole to this day in Nottingham, you can hear the shrieks of Isabella shouting out for her beloved Mortimer to be saved by her son, maybe. Could I do a video series on Sir John Franklin? Yes, it's on the list. It will be next year now. This list keeps growing and growing and growing. I've got so many things, but I'd like to do several of the explorers, some of the African explorers, but Franklin is most certainly on my list. Thank you thank you, Welsh Muslim Dave, for that one. Yeah, now we've got a debate going on with Stephen about Franklin. That's absolutely fine. Let me crack on. That date as well, 19th of October in 1781, the British surrender at Yorktown. Won't go into that because, hey, we don't want to talk about the losses, do we? But a major turning point, fundamentally, the final nail in the coffin, really, for Britain's attempts to prevent American independence, and Yorktown is seen as a real seminal battle by the Americans, obviously helped by the French. The French were there in some force. But national narratives, I love national narratives, and I hate the Brits. We've got a fair few national narratives, haven't we? And in our component parts of the United Kingdom as well. But I think the Americans downplayed the fact that the French had quite a large role at Yorktown. Rather like the French like to downplay, the British had a large part in D-Day. D-Day was all about the Americans, French Canadians, and the Free French under de Gaulle, wasn't it? Supposedly, if you're a French person, you probably sign up to that view. So anyway, we all have national narratives. Interesting one. 19th of October, 1922, David Lloyd George, British Prime Minister, is ousted. Lloyd George was a Liberal. He formed a wartime coalition during the First World War. In 1916, he became Prime Minister of a coalition of fundamentally Liberals and Conservatives. The Liberal Party split, and at the general election in 1918, at the end of the war, the coalition fought it against the other parties, which are fundamentally Asquith Liberals and the Labour Party, who got trounced by the victorious coalition who had just delivered victory over Kaiser Wilhelm's Germany. The problem and Lloyd George remained Prime Minister. The problem for Lloyd George in that coalition was actually something like 2/3 of the MPs, slightly more than that actually, were Conservatives. Yet the Conservatives didn't have the Prime Minister. The Liberals stayed as Prime Minister. And by 1922, the Conservatives, the majority party in the coalition, the backbenchers, were starting to get restless, both with Lloyd George's leadership and indeed their own leadership of their party, who they saw as too close to Lloyd George. The Conservative Party leader was a man called Ousting Chamberlain. Those of you who know your history, he was the son of Joseph Chamberlain, great imperialist. If you're into the Jameson Road, the Boer War, all that sort of stuff, Joseph Chamberlain, this was his eldest son. Ousting was called to a meeting of the backbenchers. The Conservative backbenchers met at the Carlton Club on the morning of the 19th of October, 1922. And they basically said they had no confidence in Lloyd George. They were no longer going to support the coalition. And they told their leaders that they were going to vote against the coalition. Ousting Chamberlain went to Lloyd George and basically said, my party are no longer with you. In fact, actually, my party are no longer with me either. And Lloyd George went to Buckingham Palace and handed in his seals of office, resigned. And he was the last Liberal Prime Minister of Great Britain. Interestingly, Ousting Chamberlain, without the support of the Conservative Party, stepped down, and his brother, or stepbrother, half-brother, get it right, his half-brother, Neville Chamberlain, became Prime Minister in the 1930s. So a fascinating family, actually, the Chamberlains. So you had Joe Chamberlain, who many people touted as a potential Prime Minister in the Victorian era, never did it. Ousting Chamberlain was there as leader of the Conservative Party, but didn't become a Prime Minister. And then you had the younger half-brother who did become Prime Minister, but is much maligned as the man who sort of oversaw British appeasement. So anyway, there you go. That was, and obviously the Carlton Club is still a major part of the Conservative Party now, named in honour of that meeting on the 19th of October, 1922. Harry, I want to learn more about Pitt the Elder. Yeah, Pitt, and I'm getting loads of stuff here. N. Sturgeon, don't know. Is that N. Sturgeon? Nicholas Sturgeon? Are you on here? I don't know. Don't forget the Dutch and Spanish helped too. I'm guessing we're talking about Yorktown and not Ousting Lloyd George. Thank you. There's loads of you. Thank you very much, everyone who's chiming in. Pitt the Elder, Harry, thank you very much. You're a member of my supporters channel. Very much appreciate your support. Love to see you. It's great to see you on here now. Pitt the Elder. I will go into some of our political leaders in Britain over the coming months, okay? Because I think, again, there's so much more than just military history that we can explore. And of course, they all had a massive impact on military history. And let's be honest, military history tends to be because of politicians and kings and queens, depending where you are in the world, and presidents. The policies go hand in hand. Right, anyway, where are we going? Let's keep rocking on. 20th, that's like today, isn't it? 20th of October, 1714. King George I is crowned King of Great Britain. George I was the first monarch from the House of Hanover. Hanover was a tiny principality in North Germany, and the crown went to these people. I don't want to go into lots of it. I'm going to actually do a live talk about this next week, about how on earth the Germans got on the throne of England and how we got this split between the Germans and the Jacobites. Britain at the time was heavily Protestant, had a real aversion to Roman Catholics and the Roman Catholic monarchies, which they saw as totalitarian regimes, as epitomized by Louis XIV in France. Long story short, okay. But anyway, so Britain in the back end of the 1680s, they overthrew the Catholic king James II. Replaced him with his daughter, Mary, who was a Protestant, and her husband, William of Orange. They ruled as joint monarchs, in fact, the only time we've ever had joint monarchs in British history. And when eventually Mary died first, and when William died, the throne passed to her younger sister, Mary's younger sister, Queen Anne. Okay, she was Protestant as well, so all things good. Problem was Queen Anne didn't have any children, or none that survived. She did have a son who got into teenage years, Duke of Gloucester, but he died. So we had a major problem when Queen Anne died in 1714, because they'd actually passed an act of parliament which said only a Protestant could be the king, queen of Great Britain, which was interesting because old James II, Anne and Mary's dad, Catholic, had had a son, also called James. In fact, actually, it was the birth of that son, who was going to be a Catholic and a Catholic monarch, a Catholic dynasty setting up, that actually brought about the usurpation of the throne by Mary and William of Orange on behalf of the Protestants. Young James, baby James, was now a grown man, and he was still alive and kicking. And in many respects, he was the nearest relative. He was Anne's half brother. He should have gone to him. But the law of the Act of Succession, as it was called, basically said we needed to find a Protestant. And I'm going to talk about this in my live talk next week, okay? So, and I'll give you details about that in a moment. You need to sign up. It's going to be on Zoom. It won't be here on YouTube. It's going to be on Zoom for all my History Club members and any of you who wish to join up. You need to go over to my website, historychap.com, and sign up for my newsletter. And you'll get the link to the Zoom call. It's going to be next Thursday evening, okay? But fundamentally, they had to hunt around through the royal family tree, had to go up several generations and across and down, and they finally found a Protestant, George, the Prince of Hanover, over in Germany. So he was invited to become King of England. He was somewhat bemused by the whole fact because he spoke German, never been to England in his life, didn't really like England when he got here. He liked Germany, he liked his little principality in Hanover, continued to speak German all his life. He was crowned on this day, the 20th of October, 1714. Not surprisingly, not everyone was delighted with this, with the ascension of George. Catholics weren't. obviously, but they were in the minority. There were some Protestants who weren't either, because they thought it basically just wasn't cricket. You know, the obvious thing, whether we like it or not, is James should be the king. These supporters of James were called Jacobites. And really interesting, at George's coronation on the 20th of October, 1714, by the way, first ever coronation on a Wednesday in English history, George makes many of the aristocracy, Jacobite supporting aristocracy, didn't come to Westminster Abbey for the coronation. And in the festivities that happened that day and that evening around Britain to celebrate the coronation, the Protestant supporters of who loved, who they were celebrating not just a coronation, but the fact that it was a Protestant coronation. Hurrah! They were called Whigs. Okay, supporters of the Protestant cause were called Whigs at this stage, and Whigs were set upon in a lot of towns, including Taunton, Bristol, Tewkesbury. So especially down the southwest of England, there was a strong Jacobite support in England. Obviously, quite a strong Jacobite support in Scotland as well. And in next year, 1715, the Jacobites rose, principally in Scotland, one or two in England, but principally rose in support of James. It was defeated, bit of a lackluster campaign really, but it was defeated, and it was left to James's son, Charles Edward Stuart, to lead another Jacobite rising against George I's son by then in 1745. Charles Edward Stuart is otherwise known as Bonnie Prince Charlie, and he came a lot closer, maybe, to seizing the throne than people remember. But it all went pear-shaped in the end, and he was defeated at the Battle of Culloden, the last major battle fought on British soil in 1746, up near Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland. And it's if anyone's been to Inverness, not to Inverness, beg your pardon, to Culloden. Number one, Inverness is a long way up Scotland, but if anyone's been to Culloden, it's there's something quite eerie. There's an atmosphere at Culloden. I don't quite know what it is, but it's weird. I felt it at Isandlwana as well in Zululand. But interesting. So anyway, that is now live talk. As I say, next Thursday, I'm going to talk all about how the hell the Germans ever got on the throne of the throne. Okay, so we're going to go into a bit more detail. So if you'd like to learn about that, then by all means, pop over to thehistorychap.com. Again, link in there. It says sign up for my newsletter. Sign up for my newsletter. I do a free weekly newsletter every week. Tells you what my latest video is, and my podcast as well. So you're not having to hunt around on YouTube to see if I've produced anything. You'll be told, and there'll be a link taking you to both YouTube and indeed podcasts. And there's always an update and a little story from British history, from that week in British history, as well as other bits and pieces that I'm up to in my life, like going out and speaking or meeting people like Ian Knight. Got a project coming up, hopefully. It's a bit under wraps, can't say much about it at the minute, but there's quite an exciting opportunity coming up, and you'll be hearing about that hopefully in early November. Okay, so can't say any more because I'm in discussions with someone. I'm excited, really exciting. But equally, another exciting one, looking to do something with Christian Parkinson, Redcoat Military History. So again, you'll learn about, you'll be kept up to date with things like that if you sign up for my newsletter. Totally free, so why not do it, hey? Anyway, let's finish off tomorrow, 21st of October, Battle of Trafalgar, 1805. Admiral Lord Nelson's great victory over the French and Spanish fleets off Cape Trafalgar off Spain. 27 Royal Navy ships versus 33 from the French and Spanish navies. The victory was complete. Out of those 33 French and Spanish ships, 27 were either captured or sunk, mainly captured, for the loss of not a single Royal Navy vessel. At the height of the battle, of course, Admiral Lord Nelson was mortally wounded on the deck of HMS Victory, and he died almost in the hour of the British victory. He's buried in St. Paul's Cathedral. And there's a link down below, again, for the Battle of Trafalgar. I've done a video on that. So by all means, have a look at that one and raise a glass, maybe a little glass of Nelson's blood tomorrow. This is coffee, by the way, but hey, it's as strong as you get on at 11:54 on a Friday morning. Anyway, so have a look at that one. And last but not least, and poignant, brings us up more up to date, 21st of October, 1966, the Aberfan disaster. South Wales, little village of Aberfan. There was a slag heap, massive slag heap from the coal mining industry, which was, synonymous with South Wales, I guess, and through the Industrial Revolution. The slag heap basically gave way. There'd been heavy rains. Water was undermining it. And despite several reports to the National Coal Board that the slag heap was vulnerable, nothing was done about it. Arguably, I'm not sure what you could do about it, but sure as hell what happened on the 21st of October 1966 was a tragedy, and probably a criminal tragedy at that. The slag heap gave way, and an avalanche of rock and slag came down onto Aberfan village. It hit full on the local primary school. And getting emotional. 166 children were killed and 28 teachers. So yeah, there you go. So on a bit of a sad one, that, I mean, hey, it's Friday, we should be happy. So let me finish off with a couple of things that I mean, I don't burst into tears on you. This week also, much shorter, Jane Eyre was first published in 1847. 1834, the Houses of Parliament burned down. Some people might say should happen again. This was the old medieval Houses of Parliament burned down, and Barry's architectural design of what we now know as the symbolic Houses of Parliament on HP sauces bottles and, you know, known around the world, that was constructed because of that fire. The only bit of the old medieval Palace of Westminster that survived is Westminster Hall, where Queen Elizabeth II's body was lay in state. So that's the only bit of the old history of the old medieval palace. And speaking of Westminster and the Westminster Palace, 20th of October 1858, the 13-ton bell called Big Ben was winched into place in the what at the time it was what's now called Queen Elizabeth Tower. Okay, most people believe that clock tower that you'll photograph in London is called Big Ben. It's not. It's the bell inside that's Big Ben. The tower is now called the Queen Elizabeth. Oh, sorry, the Elizabeth Tower. Anyway, and it was the bell was winched into place on the 20th of October, 1858. So I don't know. Did you enjoy this? I've enjoyed just chit chatting. I don't know if this sort of you enjoy it. I do these sort of things with my history club. Which I do through my website, but the only advantage is, I mean, loads of you are writing comments, and I will have a look at a couple of those in a moment, answer them. But I do those on Zoom, which means I can see you, and you can actually join in on those particular ones. You can join in with a microphone. But I don't know. Would you like me to do this on a regular basis, like every Friday morning? We do a bit of a week in review. I don't know, or maybe you prefer me just to do much shorter ones about each day. I have to remember. I have to set my alarm, won't I, for that? But anyway. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. And thanks, Ricky. And Jan, thank you very much. Oh, yeah, Jan, you're a great supporter of mine. Thank you very much indeed for your generosity and your support as well. Someone just now gave I'm just racing up there. Just want to thank Neil Morrison for making a contribution in the super chat. You threw some money in the pot, a bit like busking. Who'd have thought at my age I'd be busking by telling history stories? But Neil, thank you ever so much for your support. Don't forget, sign up for the free newsletter. That will also get you access. You need to do that by Sunday, okay? So I'll be sending the link out for the talk about how did the Georgians ever come to the throne of Britain, and they'll be going back through the British family, royal family tree. I'll be doing that talk next Thursday evening, live in Zoom. So you need to get the link. The link's going to go out Monday, so you need to sign up by Sunday night to get that free one, okay? So totally free. And of course, don't forget, if you really love my work, please do support me on my membership channel, like people like Harry do. Thanks for all your generosity, but above all, just thanks for your support. You know, I love history, and I'll be absolutely honest. You know, when I graduated with my history degree, thank you very much, Tree Goblin. That's very kind of you. Thank you. All my content's great. Thank you. You know, I loved history. Ended up doing history at university. Some of you have heard the story before, so I won't twitter on about it. Got a second-class degree, a 2-2 Desmond, mainly because I enjoyed socializing and student union politics far more than I enjoyed actually doing my history. I regret that now, but hey, that's 30 years later, isn't it? I guess. But loved history. Really, back in the 80s, the only thing if you wanted to do history, apart from doing research, was to become a history teacher. And my dad really, he had a big thing about history or teachers, not history teachers. And basically he had his great line, you know, them who can do it, them who can't teach it. and I had this drummed into me ever since I was like knee high. So the chance of me becoming a teacher were at zero. Always loved it. And it's quite amazing now that, and all because of COVID, that because my business went south, I started doing history and talking and telling history stories. And who'd have thought that all these years later? So whether you put money in the pot now with the busking, with the super chats, whether you join my, join my membership channel here on YouTube, or indeed whether you just, sign up for the newsletter, I just want to say thanks to all of you for that support, but just for watching my videos and commenting and being with me this morning, because quite frankly, I'm loving this journey. Someone said about the Franklin expedition earlier, I have a list as long as your blinking arm of talks I'd like to be giving. Oh, God, I reckon this is a project for life. And you know what? That's not a bad way to spend a retirement or anything else. I'm not at retirement age, I hasten to add, but doing this, why would I want to stop when I'm 65 or 67 or whatever, So I thank you, as I say, thanks for all your support. Jan's just saying, I have COVID, so I slept 20 hours and woke up at 3:30 a.m. to watch this by total accident. Well, hopefully it's an anecdote to COVID. I hope everyone else out there is in good health. And if you're not, I hope you're better soon. But look, I'm going to love you and leave you now. Could you check, Christopher has just asked, could you check when British occupied Manila, the Philippines, in 1765? Yeah, I will check that for you. And it's a story I'd like to tell, actually, Christopher, because there's a couple in that period. British occupied Manila. You're absolutely right. We didn't occupy anywhere else in the Philippines, and actually the Manila thing was, short-lived. Also occupied Havana. And what was interesting, there's some interesting stuff all around there in that period of history. And I'm about to go down another rabbit hole. I was trying to close it all now, but thank you very much. Jan, you can answer, mate. You can answer. If you live in Manila, you've got the answer right now. So, and thank you very much. The guy from SETI Alpha V, good morning, sir, from Missouri. Good morning to you too. Must be very early over in Missouri, I'd have thought. I'm not quite sure how many hours you're behind us. 6, maybe? Are you sort of mountain time in Missouri? I'm not sure. But do a video about it. Ain't half hot, mum. Oh God. Oh, I can see the woke generation loving that one. Hey, I will. The only thing I've got about it ain't a hot mum actually is quite a few. I'm not sure how many of them had a military service of their own, and it ain't a hot mum is a great story about the Royal Artillery Concert Party in Burma. I want to do a little bit more about the Forgotten Army fighting in Burma in the Second World War. And certainly want to cover off Imphal and Kohima, where I want to talk about the Kohima epitaph, which everyone here has read out on Remembrance Sunday services, but no one actually knows where it came from or what its symbolism is for a battle in its own right. Also want to do a bit about Ord Wingate and the Chindits. I told you, I've got a list as long as my arm. So anyway, I've been rattling on now for far too long. It's time for you to go and enjoy the rest of your Friday. It's time for me. I've got to go and walk a dog. And I have to be honest, the weather looks absolutely rotten out there here in Worcester today. So I'm going to have to finish off what's left of my coffee and go out and take the dog for a walk. And I've got to work on my next members exclusive video, which is all about General William Butler, one of the Ashanti Ring, who was Commander-in-Chief of the British Army in South Africa just before the Boer War, and actually desperately tried to stop the British going to war with the Boer republics. He was out of favour politically. He was replaced. Well, he wasn't replaced. He resigned, mainly because his job just became untenable. His position became untenable. So I'm going to be doing that one. So again, if you sign up for my membership, you'll be getting that video, scheduled to come out on Tuesday. Okay. So in the meantime, have a lovely weekend. Thanks for joining me. Keep well, and I'll see you again very soon.